Theresa May has condemned abuse of MPs following last week's Brexit vote. The Prime Minister said despite strongly held views on both sides of the Commons, there was no place for threats of violence and intimidation. Several Conservative MPs have received abusive messages and tweets because of their views on Brexit. Two of the MPs who rebelled against the government last week, Anna Soubry and Nicky Morgan, said they had contacted the police about threats they received. As she ended her statement on last week's EU summit, Mrs. May said it was right to debate Brexit with passion and conviction. But there can never be a place for the threats of violence and intimidation against some members that we have seen in recent days, she said. Our politics must be better than that. Mrs. May also said the agreement secured at the summit to move talks onto the UK and EU's future relationship was an important step in delivering the smooth and orderly Brexit people voted for. The Prime Minister also insisted the UK could secure a bespoke trade deal with the EU after Brexit, despite the EU's chief negotiator suggesting this cannot happen. Labour's Jeremy Corbyn said the agreement on what had been negotiated so far had been cobbled together with a vagueness that underlines the sharp divisions within the cabinet. The UK voted to leave the European Union in June 2016, and Brexit is due to happen at 23 o'clock GMT on March 29, 2019. Mrs. May's statement to MPs came after she and her senior ministers formally discussed for the first time what the UK's long-term relationship with the EU should be. Until now, the two negotiating teams have only been discussing divorce issues like how much money the UK owes. BBC assistant political editor Norman Smith said there was a clear divide between ministers, with some like Chancellor Philip Hammond and Home Secretary Amber Rudd calling for the UK to stick closely to the EU single market to preserve access for British firms. On the other side, others, like Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, want more divergence so the UK has more freedom to strike its own trade deals with other countries. After the UK leaves the EU in March 2019, but before the final end state is reached, the government wants a temporary implementation period of about 2 years. This is what negotiations are expected to focus on in the coming weeks. Mrs. May told MPs she wants access to one another's markets to continue as now during this period. The UK will also negotiate, and where possible sign, trade deals, which would kick in after the end of the implementation period, she said. She also said that during this period the UK will register people arriving from the EU to prepare for the new border controls promised after Brexit. The EU's negotiating position makes clear that it expects the UK to observe all of its rules, including on freedom of movement, and accept the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice during the implementation, or transition, period. On Monday, there was a warning from the EU side that whether a transitional arrangement will happen at all is not guaranteed. Mr. Barnier's senior advisor Stefan de Rijk said the EU hoped for a withdrawal treaty to be drawn up by October 2018, giving time for it to be agreed by politicians.